everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are once again talking about pet play, but it's something that's a little bit different than my usual videos on this subject. You guys remember that video I did where I had to talk about that one New York Times article? You know, that one? Well, I sort of have to do that again, but this time it's for a Vice article, and the betrayal I feel about this. Vice, what have you done to me personally? I just have a hard time accepting this because typically I really enjoy Vice's coverage of kink related topics and the community, and this one I think was a little bit of a miss. And because I do take a special interest in pet play, I need to cover this because this one is all about puppy play girls, and I know a thing or two about that because that's me. So we're gonna get into it, and I have some opinions. And this whole article, I will say, I thought that it was a new article because I saw it going around on Twitter, and it turns out this is actually like 2 years old. 3 years old actually now by this point, because it came out in 2020. So it is an older article, but it is becoming popular again, and because of that, I do think it is still a good idea to cover it, even though it has been a few years. And the main subject of this article is somebody called Puppy Girl Jenna, and she was really big, I think is possibly still very big, on TikTok. And if you go back through time to YouTube in 2020, you would see tons of reaction videos and like cringe compilations involving Puppy Girl Jenna. She was everywhere there for a couple of months. She's very much like the pet play Belle Delphine, and why I say that will make sense very soon here. And I have actually seen some of her content before. I have actually watched a few of her videos or videos about her during my Patreon live streams on Thursdays, and because everything around her was so inflammatory and exaggerated, I didn't really want to make a YouTube video about her because I didn't want it to come across like I was trying to bash another creator. I try really hard to not do that unless they like are very egregious and actually causing harm, which we can have a discussion about that with her content too here as well. But I just sort of was like, okay, we'll like see how this ends up going. And it has been a couple of years, and because of how popular she has continued to be in terms of her presence and influence in terms of what people think about what puppy play is, what BDSM is about, what pet play is. And I'm just worried that there might be some misconceptions that pop up if there's not really any further context given to her content or to this article. So I think the best thing to do here is just to, as much as I can, read through the whole article. I may end up cutting a few things for time because it is rather lengthy, but I will go through, read everything that I can. I'll link the article down below if you want to read it too, to make sure I'm not taking anything out of context, and we'll just go through it, react to it, and I'll share my thoughts. So let's go ahead and do that. In one TikTok video, Puppy Girl Jenna cheekily begs her food under the table at a cafe before her owner feeds her a scrap of meat. In another, she's told off for peeing on the floor and is locked in her cage as a punishment. But Jenna isn't a newly acquired puppy in training. She's a 21-year-old Texas woman who's gone viral for her puppy persona with a growing following on social media and OnlyFans. I came across Jenna's video the same way anyone comes across anything on TikTok, by swiping aimlessly through my For You page. Since posting her first video in March, Jenna has achieved viral fame. It's insane, Jenna told me over Twitter DMs. I never thought my weird dog kink would be so looked at by a broad audience, or that so many people would like/care about it. It still blows my mind. I will note that it does look like her original TikTok account is now gone, but she still does post on other social media platforms. So the article goes on to say, you might have heard of puppy play in the gay community, which first began gaining mainstream notoriety around 2015 with TV shows like Channel 4's Secret Life of the Human Pups. Jenna is, by her own admission, the most recognizable puppy girl online, but her popularity speaks to a growing trend of straight women partaking in puppy play. And I have to admit, this is when I get a little bit salty, like, what about me? I'm not mentioned here at all. And I've been doing pet play online since 2015, you know, Instagram, Tumblr, way before we had TikTok or OF. You know, I was out there making content. It's not like I deserve full credit for like inventing female puppy play, because I think trying to assign that to any one person is just not gonna be the case. But I will say, because I was on Instagram as all of this was becoming really popular and transferring over from more just being a gay men's thing, especially in terms of puppy play, and becoming something that was more done in a public way, in an invisible way online by more diverse people besides just that, I was in a sea, essentially, of just kitten players. 2015 was very much an era where people still thought, okay, pony play, kind of anyone can do that, but definitely kitten play equal girl, puppy play equal boy. And online, that was still very much the case. In real life, the whole time I've been in the community, I've always seen diverse people doing different things. I've known male kittens, I've known non-binary dragons, I've known agender foxes. Like, there are all different combinations of everything in the pet play world, but especially online or in educational resources about this, you would see a very, very strict divide. And so on Instagram, where 99% of pet play accounts were 19 to 22-year-old women that were all kitten players, I was sort of this outlier because I was like, well, I'm a puppy, and like I had to sort of adapt my style to fit the fact that what was available to me was designed mostly for kitten players, and that space was mostly for kitten players. And so again, a little bit salty because I feel like even from the very beginning of my YouTube career, I was making videos about pet play that to this day still get lots of views and gear reviews and everything else like that as well. And I was out there and I was talking about puppy play as a woman like 5 years before Jenna was around. And it's like, I still have a YouTube account. Vice, get in touch. How do you not like think to look on YouTube for other sources or other people? But anyway, I'm mostly thinking about this in terms of how this possibly reflects that the author doesn't really know a whole lot about the full history of pet play. Like, it wasn't just, oh, it was only for gay men ever, and then Jenna came along and then made it very popular for straight women, and that she was sort of the start of a wave where all these women were suddenly doing it. Like, during those 5 years on different social media platforms, which is how it got over to TikTok, there were people of all different genders doing pet play, doing kitten play, doing puppy play. It was very much becoming a thing. And so we'll just put a pin in that. We have more article to read. It might end up becoming relevant later on in our discussion. For those who need a refresher, it's essentially role-playing as a dog by barking, crawling on all fours, wearing a collar, or chewing a toy. It's a fetish rooted in BDSM and previously involved bondage gear like large leather dog masks known as hoods, head-to-toe rubber suits, and ball gags. It has nothing to do with the harm or abuse of actual dogs. Instead, the fetishization of a human taking on dog-like attributes. By contrast, Jenna, like the growing number of cis heterosexual women dabbling in puppy play, has a far softer approach to the fetish. She doesn't always wear a hood, harness, or accessories like ears or tail, but straight puppy play does share a few things in common with its gay counterpart. A 2019 study of gay puppy play fetishists identified a number of reasons participants were drawn in, including relaxation, therapy, and escape from the self. Jenna can relate. I love the feeling of being owned, she says. I feel protected and loved. I'm at my most comfortable during puppy play. And I think that's a great little sentiment there from Jenna. I totally get that. And yes, absolutely, referencing that study, good place to go. And it's true. Like many other areas of BDSM, puppy play is very popular because of how it can be relaxing and it can be so bonding. Absolutely, totally true there. And I think that definition of puppy play is fairly good, fairly accurate. The one thing I take a little bit of an issue with that I want to clarify just for us right now, because it might end up coming up and you might want to know about it, is I don't really like referring to it as a fetish outside of a very particular context. I think a lot of vanilla people, they sort of conflate kink, BDSM, fetish is all basically being the same thing. And like some kinky people will do that as well. But a fetish is a very particular thing in my mind and to most other people in BDSM. Kinky activities and sort of non-normative, intimate things you do that can be sexual or non-sexual in nature, that's all part of BDSM, and fetishes can be as well. But a fetish is a strictly sexual thing. It is about getting off to something that is considered abnormal. And there's a better clinical definition for this as well, and I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, so I'm probably not relaying that exactly correctly. But essentially, having a fetish means the person has to be interacting with that thing in order to get off. That could be thinking about it, touching it, doing the thing, whatever it is, and or it makes having relief during intercourse. I'll just say orgasm because this video is going to be demonetized. I'll just go for it. During orgasm, it can make that a lot better if you include that fetish. So it's something that is like very important for somebody's sexual response cycle that's outside of what is considered like normal sexual objects for a particular culture or context. And again, not a perfect definition, but it's definitely not the same thing as just like, I like acting like a puppy. Like definitely people can have a fetish for puppy play, but making it sound like it's always a fetish, I think, is a little bit inaccurate. And I do have another video where I've talked about kink versus fetish in a lot more detail, not just what's coming off the top of my memory here. So if you want to know more, please watch that. I would also say the one other little thing I can take issue with here that I think also comes up with how some of the people in this article talk about puppy play and pet play is it's not rooted in BDSM. It is BDSM. And I think people are reluctant sometimes to say that what they're doing is BDSM. And that's sad because I think that's really based in a stereotype about what BDSM can be. A lot of people look at BDSM and they go, oh, that could never be for me. That's all dark, dungeons, red rooms, you know, gendered violence. I don't want any part in that. I'm doing kink. It's light. It's fun. It's happy. It's not BDSM. Or they just are like playing around. It's just role play. They just label it anything else besides calling it BDSM, or sometimes even calling it kinky. Though I think vanilla people tend to be more open to kink than BDSM as a label. But the reality is that BDSM is a massive community, and it's not just dark, scary, black and red dungeons. It can be that, but really at a local community event, the pet players and the littles doing coloring books and watching cartoons, there is as much room for that in a community as there is room for the edge players. And sometimes they even share event spaces at the same time or on the same evening, right? You have the littles coloring afternoon from 3 to 6 and then 7 to 2 a.m. is the edge play night. Like, we really have a lot of overlap, a lot of diversity, and it's not just scary. And I'm going to talk more about why I think it can be a bad thing to not want to have a connection to the broader BDSM community, but again, put a pin in it, we'll get to it in a little bit. Jenna discovered the fetish when she met another pup at a kink convention in Chicago, a gay man who encouraged her to experiment with the role. She loved it and was all in, as she puts it, straight away. It's easy to see why straight, vanilla-ish couples who have never dipped their toe in the BDSM pool might find leather-covered pups intimidating. But a scaled-back approach to puppy play, like the one adopted by Jenna, appears to have increased its appeal to straight couples. I do notice it becoming more common with straight couples, says Danny, a puppy girl who shares sexy videos with her boyfriend and owner, Jack, online. She believes that removing some aesthetic pet play elements, like hoods and harnesses, has opened the door for more straight couples to experiment. I think it's more of a fetish-light kind of thing, she tells Vice over Instagram DMs. People can indulge in the subculture of pet play without jumping in full force. It's more accessible for couples who don't belong to the more intense BDSM subculture. Danny doesn't own a big leather hood. She says it's not her style, but she and Jack have spent an estimated $300 on ears, collars, harnesses, bowls, and other puppy gear. The couple find most items on Etsy or in real pet stores, where they make up fictional dogs to get out of awkward conversations with cashiers. Both Danny and Jenna say that role-playing as cheeky, lovable pups fits their personalities better than any more conventional BDSM role. A dog is my spirit animal, Jenna says. It feels more natural than a slave-owner relationship. And I find this point in the article very interesting about like the stripping back of puppy play, making it more accessible to straight couples. And I think that there's some truth to that, but I don't think it's quite that. I don't think it's that, oh, they got rid of gear entirely. I think it's that what was seen as appropriate to wear or necessary really changed. Like, again, if you were part of the pet play world on Instagram or Tumblr in the mid 2010s, you can speak to this, but we sort of supplemented or we got rid of the hoods and the heavy bondage stuff, and instead people were wearing more like light, costumey, lingerie type articles of clothing where it was like, you know, thigh-high socks and ears and tails and cute little ribbon collars. It reflected the style and aesthetic of Tumblr and Instagram and other groups at that time period, but adopted for BDSM purposes. Like, people still really care, or really cared at the time, about looking cute, and also the sun just like went behind a cloud, so the lighting is really changing right now. Okay, so just warning, lighting's gonna be changing during this. I'm gonna try to not mess with it too much, but just be aware. So as I was saying, with Instagram and aesthetic, it wasn't that it was like, oh, we got rid of all this and had no aesthetic. It, like, still the aesthetic was very popular. I think I would even argue the aesthetic is what made it popular, because it made it look cute and accessible and interesting, and like people were all about finding their look, finding their niche. I think they still are, and it's just a different way of doing it than maybe what was presented before. I will say I do think having the more stripped back approach is a positive thing. I've talked about this in the video I recently did on 24/7 pet play and having it be part of a daily relationship, and I think trying to constantly maintain a certain aesthetic really works for some people, but I think for me, having it always be about the gear caused me to lose sight of what I really enjoyed about it. I think over focusing on the aesthetic can actually be a negative. So I think focusing on more of the internal experience and that process, as opposed to like what you look like to other people, is a good thing in general. And, you know, not promoting consumerism, I think especially for TikTok, is a bit of a rare thing. So I do like seeing that as well. And I also agree with this whole like dog is my spirit animal sentiment. Absolutely. I think that's how I found puppy play to begin with. Is I thought originally, oh, I have to be a kitten because I'm a girl and everything tells me that. But then when I really got in touch with myself and tried it out, I realized very quickly, oh yeah, puppy play, definitely for me. I do feel very connected to dogs and canines, and so of course it very much naturally made sense. And I also do need to point out, I've kind of said this a couple times before, but I really want to like emphasize this, is I don't really like how this article is creating two categories for puppy play. Like, oh, it used to be just for gay men, but now it's for gay men and straight women. And it's like, I mean, online, sure, people can get that impression, but like I was saying, it's more than that. It has always been more than that. And there are people that are gay and straight and bi and pan and asexual like me that do puppy play, and likewise there are people that are cisgender, there are trans people, there's non-binary folk, there's agender folk, there's all different types of people, different orientations, different ways of relating to gender that all do pet play and puppy play in particular. And I don't really want to make it seem like, oh, it's just one of these two things now. Like, it's always been across the board, always will be. It just depends on how much representation one segment is getting over the other. But with that being said, let's read more of the article. Shane Gillis, who recently interviewed Jenna on Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast, said, "You did something to me. I saw something I shouldn't like, and I was like, why is this hot right now?" It's a sentiment frequently directed online towards Jenna. Men are both confused and turned on. That's the other reason why straight female pups are making a splash on the internet. Being the first woman to carve out a niche is lucrative, and puppy play as a fetish in the straight world is still in its infancy. It's a lucrative side hustle for those selling content, and can sometimes replace a regular job, as Jenna, a former optician, found out. "My revenue has increased 100 times since I moved to puppy play content," she once told Lad Bible. "I'm making 6 figures monthly. For Danny and Jack, sexy puppy play videos pull in about $400 a month." And this is where we get into the part of the video that I think really potentially might be controversial, because I think you can look at those statements and go, oh my gosh, people want to pay hundreds of dollars every month just to see me wear ears and a tail. Like, sign me up right away. And it's not quite like that. You guys remember how he did that Vice reaction video where it was a dominatrix and the video presumably was supposed to be about findom, but then the actual content of the video was mostly public humiliation play and walking men on leashes in broad daylight around New York? Yeah, it's kind of a similar thing to that, because I don't think at any point in this article does the author mention this, but the videos that made Jenna very popular, and maybe as a vanilla person she would not understand this context, a lot of them are public play videos. Not like her at home doing fun stuff. That also happens. It's a lot of stuff like going to an actual dog park and barking at real bio dogs, or sharing water bowls with them, or walking around on bare hands and knees on a public sidewalk and then getting into a fight also on a sidewalk with another puppy girl, or begging for water while sitting on all fours or being on all fours in the middle of a mall food court in front of families. Like, it's stuff that is very public and is not typical of most people doing pet play or puppy play. I also feel like I remember seeing a video of her peeing on a fire hydrant in public, but I can't find that video now, but I swear I remember seeing it. Maybe it's just been totally deleted from the internet by this point. And this is where I get conflicted, because I think on the one hand, from what I have seen of Jenna and her interviews and article quotes, I think she genuinely is really a puppy player. I think she loves being a puppy. I think this is very, like, true to who she is. Like, you don't, like, meet a gay puppy player in Chicago without, like, knowing a few things first. So I think she is genuinely kinky, into puppy play. I don't doubt that at all. I don't think it's a grift necessarily, but I think that she makes some choices that I don't fully agree with, that I think possibly reflect her lack of involvement or care about the larger BDSM community, and that is what I find concerning. And this is why I think that trying to separate puppy play as being this separate thing from BDSM, like, oh, it's rooted in that, but it's like its own separate offshoot now. It's not part of it, it's just a different thing that's connected to it, you know, vaguely. I don't think that that's good, because then you don't have the community values and education around things like doing things in public. And maybe it is kink shaming to say that walking around on bare hands, knees, and feet in a public dog park is a bad idea, and maybe not a good thing to promote as being part of puppy play to strangers and vanilla people on the internet. But, like, you know, if it is kink shaming, I will take that risk, because I think really, if you stop to think about it, is it really a good idea to be barking at strange bio dogs in public, or to be drinking and sharing water bowls with them? Probably not actually a good idea. And you know what? That could be planted, right? It could be that, oh, that's like her dog, or she knows the dog, or it's a neighbor's dog. I don't know the situation exactly there. But I think promoting that as being a thing to do for puppy play, again, to clueless internet strangers, again, not really a good idea. It is what it is. I accept my official kink-shaming judgment, so be it. I will endure that. And I think it's quite clear that even though she is motivated by an internal enjoyment of this, she is making salacious content on purpose to get a reaction out of people. This is why I liken her to Belle Delphine. Y'all know my opinions about Belle. I don't think she's like a bad person or wrong. I think it's the same thing that any content creator falls into, which is like the negative content, the outrageous content, the clickbait, that gets really popular. And it's hard to say no to money like that. It's hard to say no to somebody that is reacting to you and like, oh crap, you know, I had this million subscriber YouTube channel react to my content. Like, now my OnlyFans is blowing up. Now all this stuff is like going really well for me. Like, it's hard to walk away from that and not do it again. Because when you realize the button, you press the button, it gets you what you want. You're going to keep pressing the button. So I think it's like, if it's not calculated, it's certainly something that has been evaluated over time in her career. And it makes her more money. And like, why wouldn't she do that? That's the motivation, is to convert that into an income. I totally get it. It's just like that disconnect from how it affects other people. Potentially, I find to be a little bit troubling, because I'm going to get a little political here for a second, so bear with me. We are in an age where we have a lot of reactionaries that look for content like this as a way to cast aspersions on minority groups and find justifications for hating them, for encouraging violence against them. And I think it's maybe a little bit selfish of Jenna to not calculate that into the kinds of content she decides to publicly promote, because Jenna is an attractive, young, cis-het woman that is now rich because of this content. Like, whatever consequences come from somebody like Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro going, oh my god, this disgusting pet play, it's depraved, it's horrible. Like, those consequences are not going to fall on her or people like her necessarily. Like, this is not to say that she's not going to get any backlash. Like, yes, negative comments, negative engagement, absolutely, but still engagement. And, you know, she's probably, I don't know if she's a millionaire exactly from this, but she makes enough money for, like, private security and things to help keep her safe. And the real consequences of people reacting to stuff like this and being outraged by it and using it as justification for wanting to harm people, like, the people that are going to be hurt most by this are going to be, you know, people that wear pet play ears to a pride parade, or people that, you know, are just sitting and wearing a dog collar at a bus stop. That is what's really going to lead to issues, I think, is this mentality of not kind of thinking about how your own actions affect the broader community that you share a label with. And it's complicated, because I don't want to say not to be out, not to be proud, not to be who you are. I don't want to encourage people to, like, hide at home and not ever be who they are. But I think you have to calculate that in a balance of, okay, like, how are you being that, like, I don't know, it's complicated. I find difficulty verbalizing this. I would love to know y'all's thoughts in a comment down below about this, because I don't want to, like, make it seem like, oh, like, just stay in the darkness, don't ever be out. But I think the way that you present yourself in public and as, like, a representative of, like, being the most popular puppy girl online, like, that really matters. I think that has consequence, and it's worth evaluating how your individual representation online affects other people. Because even if it's not the more extreme thing of, like, oh, this potentially leads to somebody justifying violence against somebody or hatred of a particular group, the more baseline thing is, oh, this sort of, without other context, leads to people believing that stereotype of, like, kinky people can't keep it together, they don't know how to act in public, their depravity leads them to acting out in public for attention, and they want to get off in public around other people. That's why they do their kink, and a core part of the kink is doing it around other people on a regular basis. Maybe not all the time, but on a regular basis, part of doing this is exposing yourself to other people. And to be clear, this is not just my opinion about, like, Jenna personally or her content. This is something that I talked about in the other Vice video I reacted to with the dominatrix that was walking people around on leashes. Like, this is something I consistently hold for, like, community members, pro-doms, anyone. Like, I just don't think it's really a smart idea to do, even for yourself, for the record, right? Like, if you're a person who is just doing kink in public, you're not a content creator, people are going to take a video of that. Everyone has a camera now. Everyone wants the weird viral moment, and they want to capture the strangeness. And we've already seen that happen before with other people in other contexts. And I don't want that to happen to somebody, because we live in an age now where people normalize filming strangers in public. It's normal now. Like, people kind of take it as consent if you're in public to film you, to take photos of you, to make fun of you because of what you're doing in public. So I just really recommend being cautious, because you never know somebody's intentions. You never know who that person taking a photo is, or that if it, will go online and be exposed to your family or your employer, like that would be a really negative thing, right? And I don't want to be in somebody's viral TikTok for all of time without my knowledge or without my consent. But that is a whole soapbox and a half. I will step down for a second here and we will continue the article. One woman, we'll call her Emily, as she goes by @dumbpuppygirl online, told me that she had dabbled in puppy play and other fetishes for years before meeting her boyfriend. Adopting puppy and owner roles brought Emily and her boyfriend closer, she says, and reflected the dominant and submissive roles already in their sex life while maintaining a sense of playfulness and affection. We have deepened our interest in pet play together over time, Emily says. Now it's part of my daily life, not just sexual. In fact, I wear a collar 24/7 with my puppy tag. Likewise, Danny and her partner use the fetish to express affection for one another. It's mostly non-sexual in our day-to-day lives, she says. It appears strictly sexual online because that's how we choose to present it. But for us, it's pretty much just intimate and affectionate. It's almost childish and just fun by myself, and definitely more intimate with my partner. Danny wears a collar, plays with dog toys, and sometimes even eats pet treats offered by Jack. They're careful not to do anything too obviously puppy-related outside the house in case they accidentally involve anyone else without their consent. And on that point about pet play being able to deepen a relationship, I think that is very true. I think if it's just doing the pet play itself or having conversations about it, it can create a level of vulnerability in the relationship dynamic that can really help you explore each other as people on a deeper level, and that just adds a richness there that some people don't otherwise necessarily get to. I also think it's very true that pet play, like all BDSM, has a spectrum of engagement where it can be very sexual or non-sexual or intimate or fun or carefree, and I think representing that in an article like this is a very good thing to do, and I'm happy to hear it. And I do just think it's interesting that the article takes the time to call out how Danny, don't worry, she doesn't expose other people to her kink in public, without seemingly any awareness that the titular really character of this article does that very thing in most of her videos. Like, did she not really browse her other content or understand the context of it? Because how do you miss that? But anyways, there's more article to read. Let's get to it. Danny puts on her collar or harness to signify a willingness to enter into pet play. If she doesn't have a collar on, Jack knows she's just her regular self. But once in the middle of play, or scene, as Jack and Danny refer to it, pups don't usually talk. That raises obvious questions. Do you bark a safe word? But the couple have found inventive solutions. During play, we use barks and whines as a way of communicating, Danny says. Jack will ask a yes or no question and then tell me to bark once for no, twice for yes. It helps to keep us immersed in the scene while also providing a check-in. Jack adds, we do talk about some things in advance. We're always discovering new things about each other and ourselves, so we just try to keep the communication as consistent as possible. For people like Jenna, Emily, Danny, and Jack, the fetish seems to fulfill a sense of playfulness that they don't get with other forms of BDSM. How long before heterosexual puppy play goes mainstream? That remains to be seen, but as the saying goes, every dog has its day. And well, that's the article. Kind of a mixed bag, right? I think on the one hand, I do think there is some good representation in terms of like talking about how you don't need to have gear or certain types of gear. I think talking about the different motivations for it. I think talking about how you can do it even as like a newer or nervous person who's never really done BDSM before, how it can be very accessible. I think that's all really good, and I think it's overall positive. But I think that in terms of the negative, it does perpetuate some stereotypes. I think the author conflates fetish and BDSM more broadly than I think is really accurate. I don't really like how he glossed over, again, the main character of this article and their use of public play to get clicks and views, when on the other hand, we're looking at somebody else and saying, oh, well, they don't do that, so don't worry, it's fine, it's good. Like, that needed to be explored, I think, a little bit more. But I would love to know what you all think about this article, especially if you're a puppy player or a pet player in general. I would love to know your thoughts. I just like have a very mixed opinion. I think on one hand it can be sort of good, but then I just don't really like the idea that sort of like this is the representation of it, is like, oh, when you do puppy play, you yip at strangers outdoors, and it's like, oh no, okay, fantasy and reality. I think when somebody knows it's for salacious content and advertising like an OF account, people might be more able to pick up on the fact that, oh, this isn't like realistic, it's like meant to get me to click through and like buy an OF subscription. But I think a lot of people just like swiping through TikTok, they're not really gonna think of that. They're not gonna know how serious or not that it is. That's the problem with platforms like TikTok, is there is just not that same ability to always be aware of the creator's intentions, and it can be very confusing. So all that being said, again, would love to know your thoughts in a comment down below, what you think about this or what you think about my opinions, my perspective. Please let me know. And if you have not already and you would like to, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of different kink and BDSM related topics. And then finally, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. A link to that will be down below. If you do already support over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.